Good morning. Okay, so today we're going to do a goldfinch. Now, the reason why we're going to do a goldfinch is a couple of reasons. Number one, the main reason, is the other day Jack and I watched a movie on Amazon Prime called The Goldfinch. And I have to say, it was a wonderful, wonderful movie. And it was actually about a painting, and I was so inspired by it that I wanted to paint it. The other reason why we're doing it is because kids like to paint birds, and so do adults. So it crosses both those things, and I can give you a lesson that starts with the kids, and then let me tighten this so I don't lose it. And can continue on to a more advanced in the same painting. So I usually start, for those of you that are first doing this with me, I usually start with a grisaille, which means I cover the whole entire canvas with a tone. And my grisaille is usually made from yellow ochre, alizarin crimson, and blue. This case, because I wanted this to feel kind of old-fashioned looking, which is going to depart slightly from the original, I've decided for a grisaille I wanted to use yellow ochre with a little bit of brown. So you can use, I used sepia for the brown, but you can use some raw umber or burnt umber, and that will give you approximately the same thing. It's important to note that your paintings are not going to come out like my paintings, and they shouldn't. They should be your paintings. And what I'm teaching you isn't necessarily this is the most important color to put here or there, but I'm teaching you about the values and color theory. And in accordance to color theory, anybody can use what they have, whether it's watercolor, color pencil, acrylic, although be careful with acrylic because it dries so fast. In other words, don't mix all your colors right at the beforehand. And you'll get the same thing because color theory is color theory. Color theory is my strong point. It's the thing I love the most. And it's also the thing that's very important. It's a very hard theory to teach. We do have a lesson that we do with color theory that we give to the kids when they hit about age 12, or to the adults. And I find that the kids actually take to it a lot easier than adults. Some people have just to this day cursed that assignment. And some people just loved it. So it depends on how you see it, how you take it, and so forth. What I'm doing here is I'm teaching you color theory in application as we go. And eventually it all sinks in and you go, oh, this is too blue. I need to tone it down with a little bit of orange, that kind of thing. So the other thing that I do that's a little different than most people on these videos is a lot of artists, when you look at their videos, they start off with a mass and they just build it and all of a sudden, boom, there's the image, I like, because maybe it's because I'm an educator, but I really, really like to have drawing be a part of this, because I feel that if you can't draw, you can't paint. It's one of those things, You can't fix a bad drawing with paint. You can only fix it. You can't fix a bad painting with paint. You have to fix it with drawing. And in that being the case, I need to teach you that from the foundations up. So, you put your tone down, you rub it down, so it becomes almost a staining. Now this is a little too much. This isn't a staining right here. This is too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Turpenoid. It's a brand name that you can get through art supply stores, Michael's or Dick Blick. And I'm just going to rub it down with that so it becomes a stain, almost like a coffee stain. And because you don't want it too wet, you'll rub it again just by itself. Every one of these canvases that I've got has these lines through it. I wonder what that is. Anyways, it doesn't show up in the final painting, but it's just interesting. Okay, so here's our bird. You should have an image of it right there on the video for you. We're going to start first with a drawing, and we're going to use a little darker version of the grisaille in order to do that. So it's going to be a little browner, a little greener. Thin it out with your mineral spirits or your terpenoid. I often say mineral spirits because for years we used mineral spirits. So it's, you know, after 20 years of saying mineral spirits, it's hard to break the habit. Okay, so the image that we have is square. But I'm going to try to make it a vertical. So I want to place this. Placement is very important. These are the most important lines to any drawing are your outer edges, because the negative space you create within your drawing is very important. So I'm going to start with the body of the bird. Let's say the bird's head's going to be about here, right? And his tail will be probably somewhere around there. And you've got this big thing he's standing on that's going to be about there. So that means the body of the bird is going to be in here. I'm just going to do an oval. He's a little more bellied than at the top. This is called a gesture. A gesture is very important in drawing. A gesture is the underneath part of your drawing that will eventually, actually his head's going to come down a little lower. About here. So he's kind of like the pear, isn't he? Attach him like that. And let's give him a tail feather. Let's see, first his wing is going to start here. There's several layers to the tail feather. So there's the wing part that comes almost straight up. This is almost a straight line. That's a beautiful line. And you can check it by placing your brush on that line, looking at that angle. You can even imagine a clock around it. So if there was a clock around this brush, I would be touching the 4 and 11, maybe? Yeah, about the 4 and the 11. And then I compare it to here, and yep, 4 and 11. That's how you can check your angles. I think I'm going to lose part of his tail feather. That's okay. We can let it go off. All right, and then his beak is about here. He's standing on this very interesting looking tree stump that has these weird leaves on it. Okay, now, the next thing you do after you get your basic gesture in is you take a look at it. Does it feel like this bird? Actually, no. I've got his neck too long. So I'm going to pull his chest out a little. Bring that down a little there. Bring this up a little. You can take your rag that you've rubbed it down. It has a little bit of the terpenoid still in it. And you can wipe away without completely going white to the canvas. Now, if you're a person that just wants to learn how to draw, these videos are also good for that. You just don't have to do the paint part. You can add the details, you know, with pencil. So maybe his head is a little bit wider and a little bit shorter, because he is a finch, you know, and sparrows are a type of finch, I believe. Let's take off that beak so it doesn't confuse me. Let's remove these. And then just go in and look for the planes. Does this plane go this way? Then it goes this way. He has a little bit of a bulge right here. His head's a little flatter up there. And it comes down more of an angle here. And then does that. Now let's check his backside. This distance here seems too great because it was just a gesture. It was just basically to get me in the ballpark, you know, and now basically this is playing the game. I love baseball, can you tell? And we're going to bring his neckline down a little bit more. Attach that. The beak is going to go in here. And we will erase that. This is why I like using a grisaille, because you can erase so easily. In some ways, it's a lot easier to use a grisaille. Okay, and then he has this kind of break in his feathers right about there that change color. And he's got one here that does that. But this line needs to come down. So you know what I'm going to do? Wait a minute, before we do that, let's move that line down because it's confusing me. It's more of a straight across, not a scoop. So if I were to draw a line from this point where his head comes down like this, then right down there is about where that weird little gray part of his feather is. Then right up from there is the wing feather. And it comes down across here. And then there's this wing part that swings out here. That's a dark. And then there's a light. And then that goes like that. And it sticks out a little bit more. Now, if you're one of my children that are painting, I know this seems to be a lot more detail than you usually put on. I want you to try it. Go slow. Stop the video if you need to put on each shape and then continue on. I will bet if you do that and really follow the instructions, then you will make a bird that you love. Okay, this is too big. This seems to be okay. I'm going to bring that around up here. Take this out. Do you see how I have to move things a lot? You know, you don't just do it in one whack, you know? It's about, you know, fighting yourself to get there, you know? Everybody always thinks I can just bam, bam, bam. You know, I'm human, I can't. Okay, and this goes here, and then there's this weird tail feather that comes down like this, and it kind of does that. And then this is going down straight too much. It needs to go more across. I was probably intimidated by the edge of the canvas, but you know what? We're just going to let it go off because I'm kind of liking how the size of him on this. And if we make it go off, that means we need to make some other color in the background go off too to balance it. But we'll figure that out later. So I'm just going to let that go off. If yours doesn't go off, that's okay. There's no right or wrong in art. There's right or wrong in the foundations of it. But as far as design, that's your design. As far as color, that's your color. But as far as drawing, there is very specific. One is drop a line measuring, which is what I was doing. The other one is direct measuring. That's a little more complicated. I'd rather you just stick to drop-a-line measuring at this point. The values, that's foundation. Color theory and why you're using a color you're using, that's foundation. And so it's drawing, color, and value. You learn those foundations and you'll be able to paint anything. Some people say, well, what do you paint? And it's like, that's such a funny question to me. And the question, you know, the answer is I paint everything because I know how to paint. So there's his beak. Now he's looking like a finch. And his eyeball's going to be right about here. Okay, and you don't see his feet. They're kind of lost in the darkness. There's going to be a darkness that goes up like this and like that. And then there's like a little reflected light in there. But he's going to be lost. His feet are going to be lost in the darkness. Okay, so there's your basic foundation drawing for the painting. Now, in order to get, he's got a lot of white through here. First instinct, it's the first thing you see, so it's the first thing you want to do. No, what we need to do first is the darks, because the darks will tell us how white the white will be. So, the first dark I'm going to do, and I'm just going to do this in a kind of a washy kind of way to start. So these darks I've made with dark brown, dark blue. You can make it that way, or you can make it with, I'm using a dark purple, dark brown. So I'm just going to knock it in. I used a lot of, you can't quite tell on this video, but there's a lot of mineral spirits, a lot of terpenoid in that, so that it's very thin. You always want to start thin, because if you start too thick and then you add thin on top of it, your painting could crack. Because what happens is it takes a long time for oil painting to dry, and if you start too thick, the under part's not dry and the top part dries first, and then it cracks the painting. So you got to be real careful about that. You also have to be real careful about additives that you add. Any kind of drying component you add to your paint is going to increase the risk of it cracking. So I never, ever, ever add. I tried it once and it made a painting crack. And it was a painting I had sold. So it came back to me. Now hangs in my house. And it's cracked. Just kind of looks old. But yeah, you don't want to go there. Let's see. There's a leaf here. There's a line here. There's a weird little leaf in here. Shaky hands, always shaky hands. And then there's a leaf that goes up here. It's a weird leaf. I don't know what kind of tree this is. Now this real dark, that when it's up against this real white, is what's going to make this painting really have a nice dramatic effect. Remember, darks and lights will always give you, next to each other, will always give you a dramatic effect. I'm going to make that a little wider, bring this down. This is also a dark. And a dark down the bottom is going to anchor it. Kind of like an anchoring line, only bigger. Okay, and just to continue with the drawing a little bit. Oftentimes I call these beginning stages my drawing, even though they have color. People don't quite understand that. They're like, that's the drawing? It's like, yeah, that's the drawing. Okay, now there's some dark up here too, but it's a little more greener. So I'm going to add to my black a little tiny bit of green. And you might not see it at first, especially in the video, but it's just slightly different. I want to set the tone by throwing in some background here. You're just washing it in, scrubbing it in. It's not good for sable brushes, but it's the best effect I get, so I do it. This dark is going to go down through here, here, and here. I keep adding more green to it. Remember, green is blue and yellow. Before you start, you might want to throw your secondary colors, make some secondary colors. So in other words, you've got all your colors that are primaries that you have in your oil sets. And then, you know, you probably don't have a green, so you should make a green, put it aside, make a purple, put it aside. That way when I say, you know, add some purple or whatever, you have that color ready. See up here it seems really dark, but when you get close to the dark, it becomes a light. So the light side on this bird is going to be the right side. The background just kind of goes into darkness. Your strokes as far as on the form doesn't really matter at this point in the background because the background is kind of ambiguous. You know, it kind of disappears into nothing. By using this color to make this color, I'm creating it in the same world, you know, kind of like a local color. Local color is in reference to the whole thing feels like the same light, you know, the same temperature. It's a little of the same color and everything. So you don't want to go too crazy with that, but in this situation it does help. Greener there. That's okay. The background is going to be somewhat green anyway. It's okay to get tight on the bird because we will be adding feathers that will kind of break up that straight line. We're just not doing it yet. I really want to see some of these paintings that you guys are doing. Text them to me at 781-631-6030. That's my cell number and the studio cell, which I always keep on me. So text me your images. I want to see them. We may darken this on the second layer in some areas, like right up underneath here. Even though he has kind of a black tail, it's really in the light, so it's gray. I'm going to add a little more green over here. Okay, now there's a lighter green at the top and a medium green at the bottom. So I'm changing the green a little bit from the photograph because this green in the photograph, although it feels real, It's a little too emerald for me. I'm trying to keep this kind of old-fashioned looking, so I'm going to make it a little more of a light olive. And I may change it, but for the most part, I'm going to start with it first. So the transition between the lights and the darks are a softer transition, so I'm bringing some of that light down into the dark, bringing some of the dark up into the light. Just kind of scrubbing it in there to the chagrin of my brushes. And we'll probably lighten that with a little bit of yellow in the next layer, but for the most part, for this part here, we're just going to keep it like that. Keep it simple. Always keep it simple. Okay, the bottom is kind of a medium green. So it's darker than that. And that helps to the anchoring. Now, if you imagine if we made this really light down here, yeah, it would work, but he wouldn't be so anchored. Okay, so that's kind of what the background is going to look like, or the foundation of the background. Just going to soften some of these strokes. No paint on the brush. One reason why I like to do it this way is you retain your gesture. So you're not getting really like tight right off the bat, and then you can bring it to whatever tightness you want in the final layers. If you start off too tight, it kind of looks weird when you're finished. And it's, you know, it's a relaxing thing, you know, doing a gesture like that. Okay, so this down here is all kind of some weird color. So, because it's kind of a purplish yellow. But it's lighter, a lot lighter than that. So I'm going to add this color to start. Now this is just an underpainting color, but it'll get us in the ballpark. And this whole thing here has an undertone of darks, and it has a lot of lights on top of it because the light is hitting it on the light side. But first we're going to start with this undertone of darks. We want to get that in there so that when we put the light on top, it tucks in underneath. here's under here. Oh, I drew over some of the stuff there that I need. Okay, so there's this weird orangey color that's under there. And I accidentally covered over part of a leaf here. So the orangey color is a burnt orange. You can make it with yellow ochre and alizarin crimson, a little bit of blue. I put a little too much blue in it. Let's see. Need a little more alizarin crimson. When you buy alizarin crimson, if you're, you know, a serious painter on this level, you want to make sure you get permanent alizarin crimson. Because if you don't, it's going to act like, you know, rose madder or rose lake, which are other colors that are red. Those colors are not permanent, and if you put the painting in an area that gets sunlight, the reds will disappear over a period of about 10 years. That happened to me. So now I use just permanent alizarin crimson. I try to stay away from madders and lakes. Okay, then there's this really light color here. It's probably going to be warm, have a lot of stuff in it, but for the time being, I'm going to add that. And down here. And then there's another thingy going on there. It's another leaf. Okay, still in the drawing stage, but the background is finished, the drawing stage. Now, let's find the shadow's edge on this little guy. So your light is coming from the right, and the shadow's edge breaks right about here, like this, down his face. This might be out too far now that I look at it. It is. I'm going to pull that in. Don't be afraid to redraw. The beak's too big also. I'm going to pull that in. I'm going to pull this in. I'm going to do it with a darker color just because I know this is all going to darken up anyway, so. Okay, so let's make a line of where the shadow's edge is so you can see it. Look at your photograph and look at the line that I put in. If you squint your eyes, you'll see that line a lot easier. Now there's a little bit of darkness in here. So it is shadow's edge in there, except for it's broken up because the feathers are blowing out into the light. So we're just going to pull it up like that. Okay, so here's your dark side. Here's your light side. Now, even though this is going to be a black, it's on the light side. You're going to be able to see detail in it because of that. All right, so let's start with this white belly area. He has this bluish chest happening here. Now, why is that? Because he doesn't have blue on his fur. He's not a blue bird. So there must be something out of our range that is like water, maybe. Maybe this trunk of a stick thingy is actually poking out of the edge of a pond. And so whatever's on that side is reflecting a blue light. And that is then jumping onto his dark side. So I'm going to I'm going to start first with a gray. And you can make gray with blue, brown, and white if you're a beginner. You can also make it with color theory of start with white, add a little bit of blue, and add a little bit of orange. Now I'm not going to do a whole lot of blending here. Even though this is kind of a wash, we're going to try to keep it simple. Every color has its own space. temperature of the gray may change as it goes up into closer to the light. It gets warmer when it's less reflective of the water. So I'm taking a warmer gray, which means I have a little more blue. I mean, I'm sorry, a little more brown than blue in it. There's a little bit here too. Okay, and now I'm going to put the reflected light color in there. Now you got to be careful, you don't want it to be too light. So I'm going to start with this. I may end up darkening it in the second layer, but for the most part right now I'm just going to pop this in there. Don't feel you have to make this a perfectly round thing. Matter of fact, don't do that. It has feathers that stick out, so I'm just going to give the suggestion of feathers by bringing that line down like that. Okay. The blue has its space. The gray has its space. If you see that the transition between the blue and the gray needs softening, you can do it, but don't over soften it. You can always soften it in the next layer of paint by adding another color. Softening is best done by adding another color. Okay, then we have an even lighter gray than this that's kind of around here and a little bit up here. This might be too light, but I want to check it anyway. Nope, perfect. Okay, so there's some here. Seems kind of blue, doesn't it? It doesn't in real life. I find that the video color is different than the actual color. It's just like photographs, you know. Photographs color is different than the actual painting color. Whenever I sell a painting, I inevitably get a message back saying, oh my gosh, the colors are so different and so vibrant and so much better. Now we'll throw those, you know, those feathers that I said are coming out, we'll throw that in the next layer. I love when I get goldfinches in the yard. This one I believe is female because the males are very, very yellow. And we could have done one of those, but it just, to me, I wanted it a subtler photo, subtler painting of a goldfinch. Put a line there because there's a dark gray, well, a gray color in there. Let's bring these out a little bit more. And, oh, top of his head. It's kind of a point down here because there's going to be a color around the eye. Then it gets to be a lighter gray, and it goes a little bit along the back. Got a little thing sticking out there. Can you see it? Is my hand in the way? So I put that little thing sticking out. He has a little bit of gray across here. Actually, that gray kind of comes down his back as well. So I'm just going to make a line. Break up that line. See how I have that indent there? Break it up slightly. May change, but for now, let's keep it. Okay, now, I forgot to draw that thing in there and where that comes down. So before we do that, let's throw in some lighter value here. And for that, I'm going to try unbleached titanium because I don't want to go right in with white because I may want to do that in the last layer. And if you don't have unbleached titanium, what you can do is take your white and add a little tiny bit of dark brown to it. So basically, by using the unbleached titanium, what you're doing is you're putting in the darks that are going to be in the whites. I added a little white to it over here because this is a very white area, but I'm still going to be leaving myself room to throw some pure whites in there as well. I'm going a little thicker with my paint than a wash. That's okay because he's feathery, you know, so I kind of want this to feel feathery right from the beginning. Okay, then around the eye is that same lighter color, especially around the neck. So he's got these feathers that are going like this. And around here. And then directly around the eye is a very light creamy color. So I'm going to take the titanium and a little bit of yellow ochre, just a speck. It's very tight near the actual eyeball, and then it kind of fans out. So I'm going to put it tight here, a little wider here. There's also a dark line in there, which I'll add. Okay, and then the cream gets a little more creamier, so I'm going to make it a little darker. You can actually use your grisaille color if you've used the same grisaille that I did. And add that in there, because remember, these are the darks underneath. Okay, and then he gets this interesting green on his face. But before he gets the green, there's a gray right here that's kind of a blue-green gray. Let's see if this gray will do it. So to make a blue-green gray is you take dark blue, so a little bit of yellow, probably regular yellow, not yellow ochre, and some white. And then what you'll end up with is a light green. Add a little bit of brown to it, you'll get gray. Or add a little bit of red if you're using color theory. It goes here, and it goes under his beak. Oh, and it kind of comes over to the eye, and then outlines that eye. Okay, now there's a lime green in there. Lime green can be made with white, cerulean blue, and yellow, light yellow. Not too much on the white though. There's two values here. One is a lot lighter than the other. So for the first value, I'm just going to add it in under here. That's going to be our dark. There's a little bit of it over here too. For the second value, I'm going to put it in over here. That's the light value. And even though it's the light value and I'm making it light, there's going to be an even lighter value on top of that probably. Or I'm going to throw in some darks around it. There's one up here too. Okay, and there's some weird kind of combinations of gray and this lime green. So I'm going to take that color, the lighter value of it, I'm going to add a little tiny bit of my sepia to it. You can add some of your black, brown. Birds have such interesting patterns. I like painting birds because of the patterns. This comes over a little bit more. Okay, now his beak. Actually, let's throw his eyeball in first. Just take a dark. Throw that in like that. And you can, so it doesn't feel like a hole, just throw in a little speck. Whoop. Okay, now his beak is a blue-gray. So I'm going to start first, because it's complicated. I'm just going to blanket it with a blue-gray and then add some colors on top. It's such a small area that it's okay to do that. So the tip of it is really light. It's getting caught in the light. And also, it's getting caught in the light right here. Right here. And right here. And there's some darks in there too. I'm going to take some of my dark brown sepia. I'm going to just do that and that. There. Okay, now let's go down his wing. And there's a spot right here that's very brownish gray. So I'm going to pop some in there. I don't know if this might be too dark. You know, it's dark to start, so I'm going to just pop that dark in there. And then it gets lighter as it goes. So it's kind of like that. And then there's some streaks that are where the feathers are layering. So I'm going to put those bottom lines in first, similar to if you were to do brick, you know, you would put the mortar in underneath and then lay the brick on top. And then there's that creamy color that I was talking about over here is also over here. But it's a little bit lighter. So there's one here. There's one here. For these strokes, make them go down like this. I always tell kids when they're doing animals, imagine yourself patting it. Well, you don't pat a bird. I guess you could, but not a wild bird. But even if you could, go with the feather, not against the feather. This is a little browner. This is going to be fun to do the next layer, because I can already picture it in my head. And when that happens, I know I'm going to have a good time. Oh, there's some darks in there we got to knock in first. And then we'll lay some of that tannish feather in on top of that. There's a lot of weird little stuff going on there that we won't do yet. Okay, now let's get those darks in there that really separates this from just a sparrow to being a goldfinch. Also, there's a little bit of green up there. Let me throw that in first. And there's a little bit of green right there. Okay, now for the darks. Black, of course, is made with blue and brown if you have a beginner set. If you want to do the complements, you can take blue and orange. This isn't a pure black, but there are some pure black elements to it. So we're going to start first with what feels like a pure black. So it's basically just like we did up here, the under parts of the feathers as they are layered. You want to get those in first so you can lay the lighter versions on top. Now around the edges under here are dark because this group of feathers are on top of this one. Then we're just going to throw in a couple of these. And then, believe it or not, along here it's dark too. Then over here there's a dark that goes straight down, it comes in a little bit, and then it breaks up into just lines. And then that weird part I said over here, it's got these like little frown lines coming down like that. And then that's a light, this is a dark. No, wait a minute, this is a dark. Losing my pattern here. Then here's the dark here.